What's good, Savages? Welcome to another episode of Blue Collar Sports. I'm Savage Paulson, and with me, as always, is the voice of the Trenton Golden Hawks and our very own sports encyclopedia, Zach McGibbon. What's good, Zach?
I'm doing pretty good, Stefan. Thanks for having me back on. As always, it's always fun to talk sports. I'm feeling good. I'm defrosting a little bit. I know
Yeah.
we have the ice storm going on right now, but also from running into the water yesterday, which we'll talk about. But I'm feeling good, and I'm excited to bring some hot takes to try to warm me up from yesterday.
Yeah, so let's get started with that. How was the cold plunge? How was your experience?
It was something. I was kind of going in. I was feeling pretty good going into it. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, all right, we'll just run in, and then the realization sort of hits that day where it's like, oh, I've got to run into that, and I gotta go submerge myself into that. But no, it was good. It was great to be part of the Belleville Polar Plunge. Funds raised going to Special Olympics Ontario. Last I checked before we went on, our team raised over $1,100 for Special
Wow.
Olympics Ontario, which was really, really great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that donation page is still up for those that are interested as well. So if you're kind of on the sidelines like, I don't think this guy's going to jump into that cold water, you kidding me? Now you have proof of concept, and now it's like, all right, I guess I'll toss some money in there. But no, it was fun. It was a good time. Had a little bit of the nerves, but
Yeah.
I went in, I got to tell you, Stefan, when I went into the water, I was like, well, I got to go 100%,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You got to be committed to it, right? So I ran into that water like it was the 40-yard dash and people were trying to clock me. So it was like I ran in full tilt into the water. You can even see it in the video. I think I was first into the water. And I got in, felt good. And then as soon as I came up from the water, I was like, I can feel it's cold.
Yeah.
I can feel it's cold.
It's the water. I've experienced cold plunge many times, and if it's cold, if it's warm outside of the cold plunge, it's fine because you get out of the cold plunge and your body starts warming up. But if the air is cold, that makes it 100 times worse because now you're out of the water, but you're all wet, and now the air is cold. It's just making you colder. It's not a good combination. Sticking with the Belleville, I was commentating on your hat. Nice hat. It's different than wearing, I think it's the first episode we record where we're not both wearing. Actually, no, that's not true. I think the first ever episode I was wearing a Boston Red Sox hat. And then after every episode after that, we were both wearing Bass Pro Shops hats. So it's a bit different today. I have a good feeling. We have a lot of stuff to go through today. A lot of NFL stuff. We haven't done an episode in a couple of weeks. We've both been very busy. Life gets at us sometimes. So we apologize for our listeners, but we got a lot of stuff. We're going to try to catch up on all the NFL drama, all the news, the signings, the draft. We're going to all that stuff. And we're going to try to get into some baseball as well with the season that's underway. I was just watching the Yankees and the Brewers. I don't know if you caught a glimpse of that game, but Aaron Judge is they're only in the 6th inning right now, and Aaron Judge has already hit 3 home runs. Oof. It was 16-5 the last time I checked. He hit a grand slam, a 2-run home run, and I think he's hit 3 different types of home run. It's 18-6 now for the Yankees, so they're completely annihilating the Brewers. So
Yeah.
let's get right into it. Let's start with some NFL news. First on the agenda, because it kind of affects my Pittsburgh Steelers, I want to talk about this Aaron Rodgers saga that's going on. In recent weeks, he's been associated with many teams, including the New York Giants, including the Minnesota Vikings, and including my Pittsburgh Steelers. There's about really only one option left from what I hear. Maybe Minnesota is still alive, but for the most part, the only 2 options I've been hearing about in the last few days is either Pittsburgh or retirement or taking the year off, whatever it is. I think there's been some talk about that. He had a 6-hour meeting with Pittsburgh last week, with apparently ended up with a handshake and nothing more. I'm going to tell you something. As a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I've been back and forth on if I want Aaron Rodgers on my team. I think the attention he garners, for the most part, can be disruptive to the locker room. I don't know if that's just the media making it worse than it actually is, and that he's actually a good teammate, and that when the season starts, he's all business. But we all saw what happened in New York the last 2 seasons. Well, let's be honest, the first season he was out with the injury, and then last year they had a horrible season. I wouldn't say he had himself a horrible season, but it was definitely not his most productive year. And with Pittsburgh now trading for DK Metcalf, which makes me super happy that they finally have a wide receiver room that makes me very happy. Let's just put it like that. I can only imagine if they can get someone to sling the ball to George Pickens or DK Metcalf, that they're going to score more than 21 receiving touchdowns that they scored last year. What have been your thoughts on the whole Aaron Rodgers saga? What are your thoughts? Where do you think he ends up? And do you think if he ends up in Pittsburgh, which seems like the most likely scenario, that he's going to be a good fit there with the Steelers?
Yeah, it's been interesting with the Aaron Rodgers saga. It's funny, they were talking about maybe he'll sign a deal a few weeks ago. Last time we did an episode of Blue Collar Sports.
I know.
We're still kind of sitting here being like, is he going to sign somewhere? Is he going to retire? I think the thing right now is, if it was up to Aaron Rodgers on where he wanted to go, it would probably be the Minnesota Vikings, because that's a more complete team, and he could probably be able to work with that. I think in the Vikings case, they're confident in JJ McCarthy. And for me, it looks like Aaron Rodgers is just kind of betting on that he can wait. He could take his time.
Yeah.
He's got suitors that are willing to wait for him, and he can, wait for the Vikings to take a look at JJ McCarthy in preseason. And if there's stuff that they don't like from JJ McCarthy during his time in the preseason games, whether it be just fundamentals or his recovery from injury last year, then they might look to Aaron Rodgers. Now, if you're Pittsburgh, right now, looking at the depth chart, you got Mason Rudolph on that depth chart. And if it's not Rodgers going in, it's probably him that's going to be QB1, unless they go out and draft a quarterback in the NFL draft. But I look at the Rodgers stuff, and it's just kind of amazing that, this isn't the same Aaron Rodgers from years ago where he was an MVP and, an all-pro quarterback. I still think he showed flashes, but there were some games I saw with him where it just looked like he was very lost out there. Mm-hmm. And then other games where, with weaker defenses, I found that he could still play at a high level. But this is not the Aaron Rodgers of 5 years ago.
Do you think, though, his lack of, you said he looks lost, do you think that that the dysfunctionality of the New York Jets has something to do with that? Or is it age just catching up to it? Because I think it's kind of a 50-50. There's age, obviously, he's coming back from an injury, which leads me to believe that he might be better this year, considering he's had a full year under his belt after the injury. There's probably more recovery involved. Yeah, do you think it was more of the dysfunctionality of the Jets, or it was really just like Aaron Rodgers just getting old and he's just not the player he used to be?
I think it's a little column A, a little column B when it comes to that. The Jets O-line wasn't particularly strong last year. Aaron Rodgers had some targets to work with. Like, obviously, he had Devontae Adams during the midway point in the season, and Garrett Wilson was also there as well. And he's still somebody that I think could do some good things with the right quarterback in front of him. But I think with Aaron Rodgers, I think, he's over 40. He's 40, 41, if I recall. And so, some quarterbacks are able to still play very well. Obviously, Tom Brady comes to mind. I think back to Warren Moon as well. He was still playing some, high-level football at 40 in the NFL. And so it's possible, when you're an elite quarterback, that you could still produce at a high level. But I think with Rodgers, this will be an opportunity for him, if he does sign with an NFL team, to just kind of write off his own story, because I don't think he wants to leave the way that the Jets saga kind of ended for him. I think he wants to go out on a high note. Obviously, the ultimate high note would be, winning a Super Bowl, but and that's why I think he wants to go to the Vikings, because the team around him, like, he would get to throw to Justin Jefferson. That offensive line's really good. The defense there in Minnesota is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think that's the preferred team, but I think people talk about how Rodgers is kind of in the driver's seat. Really, it's kind of Minnesota that's in the driver's seat on all of this, because they're the ones that can, snap their fingers and say, okay, we'll bring in Rodgers. And I think Pittsburgh, unfortunately, is kind of getting strung along here
Right.
through the ride. So, and with Pittsburgh, as you are aware, it's not like they're a bad team. They consistently get to the playoffs. They're consistent winning seasons in Pittsburgh, and now with DK Metcalf in there, they've got some pieces to work with. Absolutely. And that defense, of course, DJ Watt leading that defense there. There's stuff to work with in Pittsburgh. It's just a matter of, with Aaron Rodgers, does he have, are you willing to put up with some of the, as you mentioned, sort of the attention that comes with it? Mm-hmm. And they have before. I mean, I think back to the 2010 Steelers, and, Antonio Brown was somebody that was just like causing headlines all over the place. Le'Veon Bell when he had the contract dispute, and even Big Ben to an extent.
Yeah.
When he was there. So it was definitely not, sunshine and rainbows in Pittsburgh when it comes to, handling of outside stuff. It's just a matter of, do they want to go through that again by bringing in Aaron Rodgers?
Look, I'm worried and I'm not. I'm happy that they brought in DK Metcalf. I think I'm a bit worried with the running game now that Najee Harris is not there anymore. Their defense is still the Steelers' defense. It was really good last year. I have a hunch that they're going to draft a quarterback in the first round, either Jackson Dart, if he's still available at that point, which I think he will be. I think the only two quarterbacks that are really gonna go for sure in the first round, if Pittsburgh or even the Rams, I heard, might be looking for a quarterback, is Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. But then after that option, it's like, what do you have? You have Jackson Dart, you have Jalen Milroe as well. Like, they met with him. So in the past, the Steelers have normally, when they meet and have dinner with certain players, it's because they're really interested. They end up drafting these guys if they are available down the road. But are you willing to burn your first round draft pick on which basically becomes a project in either Jackson Dart or in Milroe? But again, I don't want Mason Rudolph being my QB1 when the season starts. I can tell you that much. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I could deal with him being my backup like I've had in the past. But I'm pretty sure DK Metcalf, George Pickens, all that, those weapons aren't going to be happy if they don't have somebody that's ready to sling the ball. And if I look at the difference between Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, I was having this discussion with my son the other day, and I was like, I think that Aaron Rodgers is better than Russell Wilson, even at this point in his career. I mean, Russell Wilson did do well last year, but again, 21 receiving touchdowns all year. That's what the Pittsburgh Steelers had. George Pickens had 3 receiving touchdowns. It's like, I think Pat Freiermuth had 7 receiving touchdowns. He would lead the team in receiving touchdowns. And it's like, where do you go from here? And yeah, they're kind of being dragged along with the whole Aaron Rodgers saga, but at the end of the day, I guess it's something that they're willing to do just for the prospect of maybe being able to sign them on their team. So let's hope that it ends soon, because I would hate for Pittsburgh and other teams to go into the draft and have to now change course a little bit because, he still hasn't signed. And like you mentioned, he might be willing to wait all the way to preseason just for the possibility of maybe Minnesota is keeping the door open, saying, listen, we're going to take a look at J.J. McCarthy. We're going to see if he's, in my opinion, from what I've been hearing, reading, it's kind of like J.J. McCarthy was almost set to be a starting quarterback last year. And if he hadn't got injured, and we all saw what happened with Sam Darnold and his resurgence into the league, yes, it would be a better fit for Aaron Rodgers so he could try to end on a positive note, end his career on a positive note. But I still think that if he comes to Pittsburgh, that he has the possibility of doing that. I mean, they made it to the playoffs last year with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And now you got none of these guys. And you have the possibility of bringing someone that might or might not be. Obviously, again, he's not the MVP caliber quarterback he once was. But I think he can still bring enough to the table, especially with the weapons, that they'd obviously have to add. I don't know what their game plan is for their running game and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. And as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I really hope that it ends really soon.
Yeah, so. End the noise and end the madness and come to a decision. But yeah, I think quickly before we move on, I just, with Rodgers, I think those are two teams that, could you could plug him in, and I still think with the Steelers you could get to the playoffs with him, obviously.
Yeah.
I just wonder in terms of, I agree with you. I think at this stage he's a better player than Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson gives different things now than what you would get with Aaron Rodgers, but Rodgers, I think you could still do some things with him. It's just a matter of, are they willing to take in some of the media noise outside? And I think for an organization like Pittsburgh that's just kind of been dealing with that for so long,
yeah,
it's one of those things that, are they willing to risk it again? Tomlin's a good head coach and he's willing to put up with a lot.
I think they have good leadership in the locker room.
Yep.
They have really good veterans that can just stop that noise and make sure the team stays focused on the goal of winning football games.
For sure.
From one Pittsburgh Steel, from a potential Pittsburgh Steelers to a former Pittsburgh Steelers, Russell Wilson. I mean, we don't have to spend much time on him. Russell Wilson signed with the New York Giants for $21 million, $10.5 million guaranteed. Quickly, my question is, number one, how does that affect the draft? The New York Giants have the third pick overall. And they've been rumored that they could pick Shedeur Sanders as a quarterback, or whatever quarterback that's available between him or Cam Ward. I think the consensus is Cam Ward is going to go first overall, and then you got Travis Hunter that might go second overall. Whatever, Shedeur Sanders might end up going second to the Cleveland Browns. I think that affects, obviously, the decision to bring him in. Not only bringing Russell Wilson in, but they also signed Jameis Winston. So I think Jameis Winston will be the backup, and I think Russell Wilson is expected to be the number one quarterback there when the season starts. So if you bring in, let's say, a Shedeur Sanders as a third option there, you're having him sit, and I don't know if that's going to happen yet. My other question is, how much better are the New York Giants with Russell Wilson at QB?
I don't think much better, to be quite honest. I think the reason why they signed guys like Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson is the common thread between the two is that they can throw a really good deep ball. And you've got Malik Neighbors on that squad, and he's a young, really good wide receiver. So instead of having to deal with a Daniel Jones, who was not known for throwing the prettiest deep ball in the world and was more of a game manager, they now have quarterbacks that, in theory, can help exemplify Malik Neighbors' game, where he could make those contested catches downfield, and you could showcase him a little bit more. So I think that was part of the game plan with bringing in Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, is that both guys, whether Russell Wilson doesn't play at a high level, and then they go to Jameis Winston, they at least have guys that fit the scheme of what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's quite the locker room, I can tell you that, with Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Tommy DeVito as well. And DeVito's got that very strong Italian agent kind of lurking around. So it's quite the quarterback room in New York. I do see this as sort of a short-term solution. And that was the thing with the Giants that I've been mentioning for the last little bit, is that they just seem desperate right now. And they're kind of in the mindset of, if this doesn't work out, Joe Shane and Brian Dable are probably going to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And so this seems like sort of a stopgap. And it really does put into the question with these two, do they go out and get a Shedeur Sanders, and are they willing to have him sit? And the thing with that is, we were kind of talking about there, Aaron Rodgers is somebody that brings media attention. Shedeur Sanders will absolutely bring media attention as well.
Absolutely.
So to New York especially. So is Shedeur willing to be somebody that's going to be, not just second string, likely a third string quarterback because of the deals that they signed with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston? Now, I think some of that stuff with Shedeur, I think a lot of it is playing off of Dion. I don't have a good feel about Shedeur in terms of where he's at mentally. There's been times when I saw him at Colorado where, especially that time where he blamed the offensive line for some of the struggles that were going on, where you do kind of question some of the maturity issues that are there.
Yes.
And so that's one of the things with New York. It's like, do you want to bring that in? Is Shedeur that guy that you could see blossom into somebody that could be that QB, that can be your franchise QB for the next decade? Or are you willing to sit this one out and wait another year and let the QB prospects pool kind of play out for the next year and try and get a quarterback next year? I wouldn't rule that out either. So it's interesting, especially with them signing both Winston and Russell Wilson to be their quarterbacks.
It sure seems like that they're willing to just wait until next year. considering who they signed in Wilson and Jameis Winston. Like why bring in a third guy that has the potential of not playing a game this season and obviously being, like you said, like his maturity level might not be ready to play in a place like the New York Giants that even if you put Shedeur Sanders as the number one QB, they're not going to be a good football team. Like, I don't think you have enough weapons. They were 3-14 last year, right? It's like, are you telling me that you, with Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston, they're going to become a 7-8, they're going to turn it that much around, like from a 3-win to a 8-9, even 10-win season? It's hard for me to see that. And even with Shedeur Sanders. So I think you might be right. I think I kind of agree with like all signs are pointing towards, again, he might not be available after the first 2 picks. We're obviously, just talking here. But if he is available, I think there's a huge chance that he doesn't get picked by them, because why? Like, why would you make these moves with Wilson and Jameis when you had the chance of getting a quarterback in the draft? So
plus with Shedeur, I mentioned earlier with Jameis and Russell about their arm strength. One of the biggest knocks on Shedeur Sanders coming into this year's draft is that his arm, while it's still, you could have it at an NFL level for sure, he's not a quarterback that's known to throw a very good deep ball.
Yeah.
And is not the greatest at that. And so I think that's kind of a tell with those 2 QBs, what they want to do with their offense. If it was a situation where Cam Ward fell to number 3, I think they'd be more open to him being on their system, just basing it on how they've got their offense organized and how they're kind of building their team right now. Because Cam Ward has the much better arm strength than Shedeur does. And the thing with Shedeur is that he's a smart football player when he's out on the field. He's good at sensing pressure in the pocket, and he's good at extending plays. And he's a very good accurate quarterback. Some of the comps I've heard is like a Tua Tagovailoa in terms of like being pretty accurate, throwing it down the field. So I just look at the way that team is kind of built, and I just don't see Shedeur Sanders being the right fit for New York. And I think they're willing to punt and maybe even, trade up later, get somebody like a Jackson Dart or a Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe would be perfect as the guy that you can wait underneath behind a Jameis Winston and a Russell Wilson if they wanted to let him develop, because he's a guy that's got a lot of raw intangibles. But I think since the Anthony Richardson stuff a couple of years ago, where people got so caught up in oh my God, he could throw it so far, but sure, he might not be accurate, but boy, can he throw a football, right? And you're starting to see the repercussions of that, right? Absolutely. And I was somebody at the time that loved Anthony Richardson.
Same here.
But also said he's got to be like willing to develop, and you got to be willing to, keep him behind another quarterback and let him grow. And I think the Colts have screwed that up, but that's a different topic for another day. I think with New York, I think if they were willing to wait later on and get a Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe, or wait later in later rounds to try and get a quarterback, I could see them doing that. I just don't see them getting Shedeur Sanders at this point.
I agree. Let's move on. There's just so much stuff I can talk about the New York Giants. I'm not a fan of their team, so let's move on from here. I want to touch on something else as far as NFL news related. There's so much we could talk about. I have to keep it to a minimum here to try to keep the show under an hour. One other move that I kind of was not surprised, but a bit surprised, was Stephon Diggs to New England, signed a contract there. Obviously, if you look at it on paper, he's an obvious help for the young quarterback in Drake May. I mean, they had 18 receiving touchdowns last year. They were just horrible. They didn't have, I think there was not one receiver that had more than 3 touchdowns. I might be wrong about that. I was looking it up this morning. I think 3 touchdowns. So obviously you bring in a veteran guy like Diggs that could help you in the slot, that could help Drake May be the quarterback, because I think Drake May is a good quarterback and a potential superstar in the league. And then you bring in a guy like that. We all saw what he could have potentially have done with CJ Stroud before he got injured last year. Going in with a second-year quarterback in Stroud. So now he's going in with a second-year quarterback in Drake May. Any thoughts on this move? You think it's good, bad? You think it makes an impact for the New England Patriots?
At first when I saw the contract that he signed, I was thinking, what's this deal that they're making here? 3 years, $61 million for Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
He's 31, And, he didn't put up much on tape last year because, as you mentioned, he got injured.
Yeah. But even before he got injured, I didn't think he was that special. I've been vocal about him being a bit overrated in the past few years. Even while he was in Buffalo, I was big on him when he signed in Buffalo, and then I saw what he was really about, and I was just like, nah, maybe he's not that big of a deal as I thought he would. And I think this is a good chance for him to kind of prove me wrong.
Yeah, and I think at the surface level, you kind of see it as like, why are they signed to this deal? But then you actually look deeper into the contract, and really what it is a 1 year, $20 million, something like that, guaranteed. Right. Whatever that guaranteed money is, that's what it is in that 1 year. And the other 2 years are kind of like your default years where they could get out and not have to take the cap penalty.
Yeah.
So I think this is an opportunity, like you mentioned, just to kind of bring some more depth to the wide receiver position for New England. And it's kind of a prove it deal for Stefan Diggs in New England as well. Somebody that's trying to find some stability. He's in the later part of his career. And so this could be a chance for him to kind of, push back on some of the talk of, the classic diva wide receiver, right? Where they want the ball a lot. This is a chance for him to kind of push back on that and say, hey, I'm willing to work with a guy like Drake May and help him get better. And I think it works to his benefit if he goes out there and he works with Drake May to get better, because it will help make him better in the process, right? And establishing that connection. So I think this is a smart prove it deal for New England. I like the signing now that I kind of look deeper into it. And I think it's one of those, low risk, high reward sort of scenarios for them. And if Diggs doesn't turn out this year and it just shows that he's kind of a receiver on the decline, they can easily get out of the contract. So I like this move, and I think it'll work well.
It's hard to imagine that he's not going to make a difference. Like I mentioned before, 18 receiving touchdowns, not one guy with more than 3 receiving touchdowns. They were obviously trying to spread the ball. You had a rookie quarterback that was trying his best out there. They're obviously going to make some upgrades this offseason. They already signed, I think I saw something how the New England Patriots had signed the most free agents, I think, in the last couple of weeks. I think 5 or 6 guys.
Spent the most money for sure.
Yeah,
they spent a lot of money on free agency, which is very different from the Belichick years.
Absolutely, right?
Very different from Belichick.
So I'm excited. I'm curious and excited to see how it works out. Again, like, I don't hate Stefan Diggs. I just thought that with everything we heard about him, and then he went to Buffalo, and I just felt like you had Josh Allen, like you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league throwing you the ball, and you kind of didn't do much. And then in your last season, I heard there was some complaining, and like there was some rumors of some strife between him. Like, it's like you never want to hear that between from a wide receiver, especially when it's towards your quarterback. So hopefully it doesn't happen in New England. It's like you said, I think it's kind of a chance, like, we're bringing you here. It's an opportunity for you to prove to us that you're not who a lot of people think you are, and you got to work with our quarterback, because this could be extremely positive for Drake May as much as it could be complete disaster and kind of hold him back and maybe like slow down his trajectory, as far as I believe he could become one of the best quarterbacks in the league in the next 4 to 5 years, So we'll see. I had marked down also Metcalf. We spoke about him earlier. I mean, Metcalf with the Pittsburgh Steelers, another big wide receiver. We've seen a lot of movement here. I don't want to talk about him more. I think we talked about him enough. But I will say this about Metcalf. I always liked him when he was Seattle Seahawks. I like this style of play. I like his size. I like his explosiveness. I like his mindset. And bringing him in, I hope, is going to not just help the team, but also help a young George Pickens become a bit more mature and be more focused on catching and footballs instead of being a little more of a diva like we saw a bit last year. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, all depending who's going to throw the ball to them. Again, we spoke about that earlier, but yeah, that's about it. Let's move on. Talk about one of my, I guess it could be my second favorite team in the NFL. I've always been a fan of Joe Burrow. And in recent weeks, the Cincinnati Bengals made some noise by signing an extension for Jamar Chase. He signed a 4-year extension, $161 million, $112 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. T. Higgins also signed a 4-year deal for $115 million, $41 million, $40.9 million guaranteed. There's a lot of talk about that last year. Were they going to trade one of these guys? Were they going to get rid of one so they can make some? Boom, they end up signing and not to mention how much money they signed Joe Burrow. So they have a lot of money now in their offense. If I look on paper, it's hard to argue. Joe Burrow, one of the best quarterbacks, if, in my opinion, top 3 quarterbacks in the league. Like, he's a beast. I love him. He's got Jamar Chase, one of the top wide receivers. T. Higgins is extremely good, extremely efficient. But we all know what the problem is with the Bengals. They can't stop other teams from scoring. Their defense last year was just horrible. With all this noise now being done with all these stories, they've signed their offense. They're obviously, I'm assuming, going to spend a lot of time drafting for their defense in this draft, trying to improve on what they had last year. The expectations, in my opinion, are massive. For me, anything less than, obviously, you got to make the playoffs. You got to make the playoffs. That right there is the bottom line of expectation, is the playoff. I want to see them go to, I'm okay if they don't get to the Super Bowl, but they got to get a win or two in the playoff. I think that's the expectations for this team, for a team that was in the Super Bowl just a few years ago. What's your thought on all this? Do you think that the Bengals can make an impact this year and be one of the top teams in the NFL?
I think it's like what you pointed out. It's going to really depend on how well they do in the draft to try and fill in those holes on defense. And if they're willing to, it sounds like Trey Hendrickson, who is one of their better players on defense. At first it seemed like they were working on an extension. Now there's been rumors about a blockbuster trade in the works for him. So we'll see with him on that front. But it seems like the strategy for the Bengals is, what's a good defense? Well, a better offense. That's how we're going to do our defense. It's just an even better offense. So yes, they're going to score 35 points, but we're going to try and score 40 points each game. Right. And
which is asking a lot from an offense, even with all those tools.
Yeah, but we saw it last year with the Bengals on they could score points. The issue wasn't the offense when it comes to scoring points.
No.
It was a matter of stopping the other team from, getting points back on their front. So I think this is going to come down to a commitment and showing that their scouting personnel can go in and find some, diamonds in the rough, for lack of a better term. And we've seen it happen before with other teams in sort of different scenarios, but trying to build through the draft. We saw that with the Rams and how they were still able to be competitive in their division, because even though they kept getting rid of first round picks like it was candy, they were so good at finding guys in later rounds in their 4th, 5th, 6th rounds that could end up being starters, that those Rams teams ended up still being very competitive. Even this past year, I mean, they brought the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, they brought them to the wire in their playoff matches.
Absolutely.
Right? And that was through building through the draft. So I think it's going to take a commitment from Cincinnati. I think it also shows that ownership is committed to making sure that Joe Burrow is willing to stay. I know he signed the extension recently. I think now 2 years ago at this point. Yeah. But once it comes up, it shows, hey, we're willing to spend money to help keep you happy because we know you're a guy that could help lead this franchise. So it's very interesting with the Bengals, because for the longest time I just kind of took them as a team that would not be willing to make that extra effort to spend money.
Well, they showed it in the past where they were content with a losing season year after year, and they weren't willing to make any real changes to their roster. They were just content of being the Bengals.
Yep, they were fine with being part of the AFC North, and if their team's good, that's great. But, raking in cash and their ownership group, the Brown family isn't exactly, I don't think they're one of the more lucrative ownerships in the NFL. I think they're in the bottom half. So it's showing to them that, yes, we're willing to make this commitment to you. And so, I think at the end of it all, it's just going to have to come down to how they draft for defense and being good with selecting their players on defense as well to really kind of form this team. But the strategy right now just seems to be, well, our defense is good, so we're just going to make our offense like otherworldly,
right?
To try and make up for the lack of our defense. So,
and I think it's not like they don't have to become the best defense in the league.
Oh yeah,
they just have to improve just a little, Instead
as long
of
as
letting
they're passable at this point,
right.
like if they're a passable defense, they'll be fine.
Keep it to about 21 to 24 points on average instead of 35 to 38. Can we just bring it down a notch? Like, you just switch a personnel here or there, maybe a guy here, maybe a guy there. And maybe it's just a change of mindset as well, right? It might be coaching. It might be a lot of different things. Who knows? But again, the trend with the Bengals was for a long time, we'll just status quo. As long as we're making money, I don't really give a shit if we're winning or losing. As long as we're just still in the NFL, we're happy. We're kind of just happy participating. And if we get 3 wins, well, we got 3 wins. But now you got Joe Burrow. I mean, the guy's a superstar. And now you just spend all this money on your offense. And to let it go to waste and to have this guy not give everything you got to get this guy a championship in Cincinnati is, to me, be a real waste for the Bengals.
For sure.
Anything else, NFL, you could think about that we could chat before we move on to baseball?
No, nothing much right now. Just, getting excited for the draft. I've been trying to watch some film as much as I can and kind of get a sense of everybody and getting a sense for everything. And the more I watch of Shedeur Sanders, the more I'm like, he might fall a little bit in the draft.
I saw something today. I think it was Tannenbaum, his mock draft. His latest mock draft has him dropping down to 10 and the Steelers trading up to pick him at 10 with trading with the Bears, I believe, have the 10th pick.
Gotcha.
And have them, dude, if he ends up in Pittsburgh because they have to trade up to get him, I'm not sure I'm crazy about having Shedeur Sanders start the season as QB1. At that point, I might go, maybe put Mason Rudolph in for the first few games, see what he gives me, because
see how that goes.
What's going on? I mean, again, I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, but I want my team to win. I think my team they made it to the playoffs last year. Again, they've consistently proven they're a very well-coached team. Leadership is very strong. They're one quarterback. Since Big Ben's been done, it's been rough for them. They've gone through a lot of changes in the quarterback room. I just want some consistency, even if it's only for a couple of years. Just give me some consistency at someone that could throw the ball and that can make our offense what it used to be and not be so dependent on our defense every single game trying to steal a game for us. Because you could tell it gets on the Steelers a lot, especially on the defense. The injuries start piling up because they're game after game after game. It depends solely on them. And I know that's how they're built, but I want to see some offense next year. So I've been watching.
And I got no complaints about the Cowboys right now because they've done nothing. So what is there to complain about when they've done nothing?
I saw they're associated with maybe drafting a tight end, Penn State guy.
I saw that too. Genty's still kind of hovering around there
right.
if he falls to that position. They've also been talking about wide receiver. Luther Burden is the guy that's got to be circled. Also that receiver from Arizona as well. Because they need that receiver depth right now. It can't just be CD.
No.
And Brandon Cooks, they let Brandon Cooks go in free agency, which is not a shocker.
Yeah.
But so they need to get some depth pieces right now at receiver. I know they've talked about a running back with Ashton Genty, but I think this running back class actually looks really good this year. And I think if they're willing to wait a little bit, I think they could find a good running back in the 3rd or 4th round.
They have some good guys, but I like this Ashton Genty guy though. I think this guy has the potential to be like a Saquon Barkley type guy. Like he's clean. He's a clean runner. I know he seems to have crazy numbers when sometimes you look at his college numbers and you look like that's crazy amount of touchdowns he would score, like 3-4 touchdowns per game, and he's just like, I'm like, oh, wow, that's crazy, that this can't translate into NFL. And he's not. I don't think he can come in and score 3-4 touchdowns. But there's a lot of teams that could use a running back. I would not shit on the Pittsburgh Steelers if he drops down and they could pick him that far. I just don't think. I think the Raiders are associated with him at number 6. I think he might go as high as number 6. Number 10 with the Bears. Who knows, right? And obviously your Cowboys are picking before my Steelers, I believe, no?
We're 12.
Yeah, we're like 20.
So yeah, I think the Steelers are a bit after that. So.
Yeah, so who knows? I'm excited about the draft. It is not the best draft as far as quality of talent, but I'm still excited about seeing. There's always going to be some. I'm excited. I'm hopeful that there's going to be some teams that trade up to make some moves to make so that we can have something to talk about on the episode following the week, right? From football to Major League Baseball, the season is finally started. It came fast. I was watching preseason just a few weeks ago and did not expect that this week I'd be watching openers. I sat down here on Thursday night. I watched a bunch of baseball. Same thing last night, Friday. Watched some games. Very excited. We're still obviously 2-3 games into the season. There's no real surprise right now as far as teams. The Dodgers look strong. There's so much to talk about. So many teams involved. So I want to keep this as short as possible when it comes to. I'm going to roll out what I think are going to be the division winners, whoever wins in the AL East, in the AL Central, in the AL West, all that goes. Hot takes, no hot takes, whatever. There's so much going on, and it's so early in the season. Baseball is fun for that. A lot of guys starting. I didn't even realize until I watched it today, but Giancarlo Stanton started on the DL. He's injured. I didn't even know that. As I mentioned earlier, the Yankees were on fire right now. They were droughting. They were just murdering the Brewers. The final score here was 20-9. Yeah, that's insane. They hit 4 home runs in the bottom of the first. All right. They went up crazy. Any excitement as far as you're concerned with, before I get into my predictions, anything that excites you about this season and the baseball season?
Just kind of speaking as a Jays fan.
Yeah.
It didn't start off too great Thursday, and I watched a little bit of Scherzer's debut before we recorded, and he let in 2 runs before we started the record. I haven't checked on the updates since then, but
it's 7-4 for the Orioles.
See, there you go. So, which I'm not too surprised about there. Orioles look like a really good team. It's just going to be a matter of they can be consistent at the end of the year. And that's without Gunnar Henderson, by the way. Like, Henderson is also, out with injury for the time being. But, as a Jays fan, I'm kind of going in with some cautious, skeptical optimism, if that's a phrase.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay optimistic, but I look at this team. There's guys there. Like Santander looks like he's a good player, and we'll see how Vladdy does. He's kind of in the mix potentially for the MVP, which would be nice. But as a Blue Jays fan, like, I'm kind of unsure. I think the division this year is just so stacked between the Yankees, the Orioles, and the Red Sox potentially moving in. That's gonna be really tough for the Jays this year to try and sneak into a playoff spot.
Yeah,
I am excited though, and that might be a tease for later. I'm very interested to see how Paul Skeens does this year. He's such an exciting pitching prospect, and we saw what he did last year. It'd be nice if they could stop trying to make the Livy Dunn, Paul Skeens thing.
Right.
This couple, they have the charisma of cardboard every time I see them, but they really try to make them
just let him be a baseball player.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop trying.
You can tell even Skeens is like, look, man, I just go out there and I throw 99 mile per hour fastballs. Just let me do my thing, right?
Yeah. I think that would be a detriment to his career. I think that would make him a bad baseball player. Because I don't think that's who he is. I don't think he's a guy that wants the camera in his face all the time. I was watching an interview with him on YouTube yesterday, and you could tell that he's just not there. I'm not saying he can't become that guy. Obviously, he's that good. He's a superstar. He's probably going to end up being the best pitcher if he doesn't get injured in the foreseeable future in the major leagues. But I do agree with you about that. Yeah, stop trying to make them the hot couple for baseball and just let him pitch and just be happy with the excitement that he brings to the game.
This is not Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift out there. Yeah. At least they have charisma, right? And you can at least be with Paul Skeens and Livy Dunn. I'm like, man, they're trying so hard to make this like this charismatic, baseball's, couple, but boy, like Skeens especially just does not seem like a guy that wants to be out there. So
absolutely not. So let's get started with the American League East. You got, the Yankees, the Rays, the Orioles, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays. We spoke about the Blue Jays. I'll be quite honest. At the beginning of this week, I got to work one day, and I work with this guy. He's also a huge baseball fan, and I told him I said, here's my hot take. I think the Blue Jays are going to make it to the World Series. And then I walked it back. I was like, I looked at their team. Look, I think the Blue Jays have a good starting roster as far as starting pitching, but we saw Barrios didn't look that good in his first. Obviously, look, we're 1 out of 162 here, all right? So we're getting ahead of ourselves. It's not necessarily about the Blue Jays here. It's about who else is in the AL East. I mean, the Yankees. They look great today. They didn't look good the first game. Obviously, it's going to take a while. The Rays, I think the Rays are going to end up being last in the division. The Orioles are just stacked, and they're young, and they just keep getting better and better. Jackson Holliday, he's the guy I want to see if he can bloom into the superstar that I think he could be, because I think Jackson Holliday could be the future of this game. I don't know why I believe in him. There's just something about him. He's a really good player, but they have other players, Gunnar Anderson. They have so much going on. But my pick to come out of the East this year, I think, is going to be the Boston Red Sox. I think the Boston Red Sox are a very good team. Alex Bregman, the addition of Bregman at third. I know Devers didn't want to play DH this year, but he's been unfortunately reluctantly forced to be the DH. He started off the season. He's not going to play every game at DH, but when you have a Gold Glove like Bregman on third base, like, you can't just move him to a different infield position. You got to stick with him. Devers is a good hitter. He is a good defensive player, but he's not as good as Bregman. I think that the Red Sox have the potential to surprise a lot of people. They have a good young team. They have a lot of good prospects coming up as well. So even if they do get injured, I think there's guys that could just jump in the infield, jump in the outfield. I think they, if not this year, they're definitely on the up. But for me, it was between them and the Orioles. And at the end of the day, I'm just a big believer in the Red Sox this year. I think they're going to surprise. I think they're going to make it all the way to the World Series. That's my pick. I picked the Dodgers versus the Dodgers versus the Red Sox in the World Series this year. I think the Dodgers are going to make it back again. But AL East, I think the Red Sox are really strong.
Yeah, it really is going to be between these three teams, the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Orioles. I was hovering between the Yankees and the Orioles, kind of being the team to win it. I like the Red Sox. I don't know if I love them as much as you do, but only because, like, I look at the Orioles and I'm a big upside guy, and I think the Orioles' upside is just so strong that I'm going to lean on them. Now, I'm saying that also well aware that we've seen sort of a pattern kind of established with the Orioles in the past, where it's like when they hit high, they hit very, very high, but they can be very inconsistent. So, but I take that to them just being a younger team. I look at the guys that they have there. I think Jackson Holliday, somebody you mentioned there, like, this is going to be a big year for him to try and take that next step.
Absolutely.
But they've got a guy who could be an MVP candidate, and Gunnar Henderson once he's healthy.
Yes.
And so I look at this squad that they have here in Baltimore, and I'm going to pick them to win the AL East. I think it's going to be a battle between the Yankees and the Orioles to get that first spot. The Yankees are going to be interesting this year because I don't think they're as strong of a team this year as they were last year.
No, especially with Garrett Cole out for the season.
Yeah, losing Garrett Cole is going to be big for them. I do wonder about their depth a little bit, so that's why I kind of went with the Orioles. The Red Sox could certainly be a team that could surprise. We obviously mentioned the Blue Jays. I'm kind of a little bit, we'll see with the Jays. On paper, you look at some of the guys that they have there and you think that they could make some noise.
Absolutely.
But it's a loaded division, right?
I think Vladdy is going to have an MVP type season. But I think that if they're out of the playoffs by the trade deadline, that they're just going to end up trading him away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly Bo Bichette for sure. That's a guy that needs to step up this year and increase his production. And then the Rays, they're just kind of in a the Rays are kind of in their own situation with their baseball stadium and now having to play at the Yankees, minor league affiliate. That's a whole situation in of itself.
It's not a good situation in Tampa Bay with them playing not home. So it'd be hard to see them become, I mean, who knows? I've seen crazier things in baseball, but yeah, I don't have high expectations for the Rays. AL Central, I have the Detroit Tigers coming out of the AL Central. I mean, you look at the AL Central, you got for me, it was between the Guardians. The Guardians last year were a strong team. I think the Tigers, though, this year, they started off 0-2, so obviously it's early in the season. With Screwball as the Cy Young last year, and I think he's had the potential to repeat this year. He's actually my Cy Young pick for the American League. Great pitching. They have some good players, young players. Obviously, there's some There was some movement in the infield with Cole Keith and Torkelson, I believe, isn't it? Yes. There is certain things that worry me about that team, but I think the AL Central is weak as far as division. So my pick for them was the Detroit Tigers coming out of that, the AL Central.
Yeah, I know the Chicago White Sox aren't going to be winning the AL Central, and they might not be winning anytime soon the way that that organization has played out.
It's sad because, I mean, it's just like they have, what's his name, Roberts there that got drafted a few years ago. He's a good player. They had some good players, but yeah, I think they're cursed for a while, that team.
Yeah, that's a whole situation. It's kind of sad to see how Jerry Reinsdorf has kind of fallen off as an owner.
Yeah.
So I am not going to pick the White Sox. I'm not going to shock people with that. I know they won. They won their opener, but it's going to be tough this year. I look at this division. I kind of like the Kansas City Royals this year. I think they've got some good talent. Bobby Witt Jr. Obviously.
He's my MVP pick.
Yeah, that's also my MVP pick as well. I think he could really be something. He's really growing as a player. I think he got some good pieces there in Kansas City. And I think with the way the division has rolled out, but for me, it was between the Royals. It's funny with the Guardians because like some years I'm like, the Guardians, they're kind of there, but then they just win and I can't
even
explain
when they make it to
so,
the playoffs, I don't expect them to win. I still expect them to lose. I'm like,
it's like this year is going to be the year where they're not going to make the playoffs.
Right.
So
and there's
a part of me that wants to vote.
Right.
Right. Like there's a part of me this year that wants me to just say Guardians because like they've just proven me wrong every year. But I'm also in the back of my head, it's like, but this is also the year they're going to fall off again. Right. Yeah. Like this is the year. So, the Twins are kind of an interesting team as well. So for me, it was between the Twins and the Royals. I do like the Tigers though. That's also a solid squad.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pick the Royals. I like I mentioned with the Orioles, I like the upside that they have. And this is a team that's got some good pieces in place. And I think they could make some noise here. So I'm going to pick them in the AL Central.
They were a very close second for me. Like I was teetering between these three teams. The Royals, can they be consistent? Can they win important games later on in the season? And I think that's been a big factor for them is that they kind of showed fatigue later on in the season. Maybe it has to do with the lack of experience, but I do think that Bobby Witt Jr. is going to have an MVP season this season. I love the kid. The way he plays, he's just top notch. AL West, I will tell you who I think is not going to win the AL West. Let's start there. I think the Angels are not going to win the AL West. I think they are horrible. I have a friend I work with. He's a huge Angels fan, and he was all excited about the opening. He's like, I can't wait to get home and watch. And then the next day, he's like, fuck this. He's Australian too, right? So he was like, man, he's like, hey, when I turned around, it was 8-0. I was like, yep. I was like, it's going to be a long season for Mike Trout. It's sad. It really is, because I think Mike Trout, I mean, at a certain point, Mike Trout had the potential to be one of the best baseball players in the history of the game. Like, I truly believe that. Injuries and playing for the LA Angels were his downfalls. So I don't think the Angels are going to do much this year. I don't think the Athletics, I think the Athletics are going to surprise. I think the expectations are so low for them. They're kind of in limbo of being in Sacramento, waiting to maybe go to Las Vegas next year or wherever. I think the Athletics are going to surprise, but at the end of the day, I pick the Mariners to come out of the AL West here. I think they have a strong team. Pitching is good. I think Julio Rodriguez is going to have a resurgent year this year. He struggled last year, was out for, I believe, with injuries for a little bit, but I expect some big things from the Mariners this year. The Rangers as well. It was between them and the Rangers. The Astros as well. Like, there's so many good teams in this division. But to me, I just had a hunch. I was like, I think the Mariners are going to come out of the West this year.
Yeah, I'm also picking the Mariners as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like that team. Like what you said there with Julio Rodriguez, I think this will be a good bounce back for them. I like their starting pitching. Yeah, I don't see the Athletics or the Angels making runs. It's funny, we have to call the Athletics and not the Oakland Athletics or the Las Vegas Athletic. We just have to call them the Athletics. Like, I went on their website and they don't even have, it's just Athletics. I'm like, because my son was like, where are they from? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, are they playing Sacramento, I think? And he's like, yeah, but they're not announcing them from there. I'm like, huh.
So I went on the
Might
website.
as well call them purgatory athletics, right? They're just in this in between.
It sucks for them because they have a good young team. They have some good young players. And I liked them as an organization. Ricky Anderson, I think there's some history there back in the 80s. I remember watching them when I was young. I liked the uniform. I've always been a fan of the Athletics green, yellow. Like, I'm just a big fan. But yeah, they're in purgatory, and I don't expect much from them either way.
Yeah, I don't either. But yeah, I've got the Mariners here. I could certainly see the Astros are always a team that's going to bang the garbage can and get themselves into contention. But I like the Mariners here this year. Yeah, I think they'll win the division.
Any thoughts on, so you think that as far as American League MVP, you're going to Bobby Witt Jr., just like me, you think he's the guy, right?
Yeah, Bobby Witt Jr. for me is the guy that I'm looking at for the MVP. In terms of the Cy Young, just kind of like looking at players here and just kind of determining for the AL side of things. You know, it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see Max Fried in there. The favorites right now when it comes to the betting odds that I see are Tarek Skubal and Garrett Crochet. And so, but Max Fried could be somebody. Cole Reagans as well as another guy.
Cole Reagans is there as well, right? Jacob deGrom. I think Jacob deGrom, if he stays healthy, could potentially be the 3-time Cy Young winner.
Yep, deGrom was somebody I was thinking about, but like what you mentioned, that's going to be a case of can he stay healthy?
Yeah, and
because when he's healthy, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball,
if not the best. Like, he's hard to hit. But he has to stay healthy. I think Crochet with the Red Sox is also a really good pitcher. I'm excited, again, about the potential, but at the end of the day, what I watched Skubal pitch in the opening game, and even though they ended up losing, there's something about the way he pitches. He pitches strikes. He doesn't shy away from the strike zone. He's very aggressive. And that the thing that helps him is that umpires love pitchers that are aggressive like that because it makes the game go fast. That's one thing a lot of people don't talk about, but I'll tell you right now. If you make the ump's job easy by just throwing strikes and not be all over the place and he just throws strikes. He's not afraid to come at you no matter who's at the plate. And that's why I like him. He's aggressive. That's why he's my pick for Cy Young. But again, there's so many different guys there that you could pick, like deGrom and all these other guys. National League. I'm a big fan of the National League. I've always been a bigger fan of the National League than the American League. I liked it before because the pitchers would hit versus the American League. I was always a fan of that. So let's start in the National League East. To me, this was a hard one. The National League is stacked. As far as stacked, I want to say stacked. Look, it's between the Phillies, the Mets, and the Braves. Let's be honest, I don't think the Nationals are going to make much noise. I don't think the Marlins are going to make much noise. If they do, it's obviously going to be a surprise. I'm going to go with the Mets here, even though I'm a huge fan of the Phillies. It was between the Phillies and the Mets. I think the Braves are going to fall off a little bit this year. I think they're going to fall back. I think the Mets spent too much money. I think last year, they surprised a lot of people on how far they got. And just something about that team, the addition of Juan Soto. I mean, listen, I picked the Mets here.
Picking the Mets. I was going to look at the Phillies. And when I look at this division, I see 3 teams, all that could make the playoffs at least. Mm-hmm. There's certainly some wild card teams in there that could certainly make some noise. So it was tough to kind of figure out who would eventually win the division. I was hovering between the Phillies and the Mets as well.
Yeah.
Because with the Braves, I certainly see a fall off. With the Mets is such a tough team to predict because they are the New York Mets at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's so.
I will give that to you. That's true. That's true.
They've got some very good players. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, they spent a lot of money to get Juan Soto in there.
We might get to the midway through the season and half their roster is on the DL.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's the Mets, right? That's how it rolls. And of course, they'll get injured in the most peculiar way, right? One of them's going to fall down the stairs. One of the starting pitchers is going to fall down the stairs and break his arm.
Slip in the shower or some shit like that.
That's right. Yeah. Food poisoning. Something is going to happen to the Mets. That's what we've learned with them.
It's like a little curse,
There's something going on with New York. I don't know if it was from that 86 Mets squad, if Darryl Strawberry made a deal with the devil to win the world. I don't know what it is, but it's something.
They sold their soul for one championship.
That's right. A legendary team, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's been a while. But I look at this team and there's a lot of pieces on the Mets that I like. Obviously, Juan Soto in there, but, they got Pete Alonso back on first base and, Francisco Lindor as well at shortstop. Like, they've got some players to work with. With the Mets, but I decided to go with the Phillies. I really like that squad that they have there. It's a little bit of an older squad now, but
I think the Phillies have one of the best starting rotation in the majors.
Yeah, with Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, like they've got
they
some
stay
really
healthy,
good players.
They're gonna be hard to beat. If I see them on top at the end of the season, it's because their pitching was healthy all year. Because they do have the best pitching in the National League.
And one of the big things, too, is with their bullpen, they brought in a guy in Jordan Romano, who's the former closer for the Jays. If he can get back to that level of being an all-star closer, I really like this Phillies squad. So I picked the Phillies because I just look at the overall team, and there's a lot to like with this Phillies team, so I'm going to pick them to win the division.
Next up, the National League Central. This is a division that I kind of don't look. A lot of teams here that don't really give me any confidence, except if I had to pick one, which is my pick, it's the Chicago Cubs. I'm like, if I'm going to pick someone, I might as well pick the Cubs. I like the Pirates. We mentioned earlier, they have one of the best pitchers in the name, Paul Skeens. But I think that's about all they have right now. And the Cincinnati Reds, as much as I like them, I can't see. They did bring in a new coach in Francona this year. He is a good head coach, but I don't think they have the squad just yet to get to the playoffs. The Brewers, it's another team that might be able to grind out some wins, but I don't think they have the potential to be here. So I eventually just ended up with picking the Chicago Cubs here. I think they have a solid team. Their pitching is strong. Their defense is okay, and they can win ball games. And they brought in Kyle Tucker, I believe, in the offseason. So that's a good addition to the Chicago Cubs. So I'm going to pick the Cubs here.
Yeah, I kind of reluctantly with the Cubs as well. Yeah. I was looking at the teams here, and with Francona there with the Reds, I think the Reds could be a sleeper team this year. Only because I think Francona is very good at getting the best out of his players.
Yes.
And I really like Ellie De La Cruz.
Yeah, he's
for
amazing.
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Tremendous ball player. So I can't rule it out. With the Pirates, so Paul Skeens is my Cy Young pick. I know it's kind of your normie pick, but I think this guy, the way that I've seen him pitch and just how dominant he is so far, like, to me, like he's a pretty easy Cy Young favorite for me.
Absolutely.
But with the Pirates, that ownership is also a team that's, doesn't really like to commit a lot.
No.
It seems like for me, when I look at this roster, it wouldn't shock me if somehow, I just look at all these players and Andrew McCutchen ends up being still the biggest producer of points for them, which is crazy to think about in 2025.
He left for so many years and now he came back and he's still their number one guy.
Yeah, like he could still be the reliable option, right? Which is crazy to think about. But yeah, it really is kind of feels like it's Paul Skeens, then later half Andrew McCutchen, and that's it for the Pirates.
Right.
So yeah, I look at this Cubs team. I was trying to will myself into the Brewers because I like that organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm going to go with the Cubs here. I think they're going to win the division. It's going to be very tough for me to see any of these teams. Even, looking at the Cardinals, it's tough for me to see any of these teams making a wild card spot in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. Moving on to the last and the most exciting division, in my opinion, in baseball, the National League West. A lot of teams here that, including my San Francisco Giants, that I am keeping my fingers crossed, are going to be able to. I don't think they'll win the division. I think they can get into a wild card spot, though, in my opinion, if they stay healthy and if they're able to play their type of baseball, which is win games in later innings, grind it out, just pitching, keep the pitching to 3-4 runs, and then be able to grind out. I think with the addition of Buster Posey in the front office, their new mindset, their new approach, I think it's going to make a big difference. I think it's going to make a big difference for the Giants, but they're definitely not my pick because alongside them is the LA Dodgers. It's hard to pick against the LA Dodgers. So I'm going to pick the Dodgers here. Even though I think the Padres have a stacked team, I think the Diamondbacks can make some noise. They have made some noise in the past few years. The Rockies are going to finish last, let's be honest. I don't think they're going to make much noise. They haven't made much noise in a few years, so I'm just going to leave them in the basement and talk about the other 4 teams. I think we're going to potential of seeing 2-3 playoff teams just come out of this division right here. The same, again, with the NL East, with the Phillies, with the Mets, maybe even the Braves. Like, so much is going to play. That's why I think the National League right now is more exciting, because at the end of the season, it's going to be, I think what is important here is, can these teams win early on to stack up enough wins so that when it matters at the end of the year and injuries start happening and shit starts happening and losing streaks and all that, that they can build some momentum early on in the season. But NL West, LA Dodgers, I mean, come on. It's almost unfair when you look at their lineup, when you look at their starting rotation. I mean, Jesus. It's like, man, the rotation they have, and the potential of adding Ohtani to that rotation because he's pitching, the potential of getting Kershaw back after him not playing at all last year, even if it's only to come in as a, like, it hurts my brain. So LA Dodgers here reluctantly, because I fucking hate the Dodgers.
Yeah, they have become the modern day New York Yankees in the sense of just spending money and getting all these players. And so it is also with reluctancy that I pick the LA Dodgers to go in there. And I've got Shohei Ohtani getting another MVP award in there as well, because why not at this point, right? It's just, I look at this Dodgers squad, just how much they were willing to spend. I'm not going to fault the Dodgers for, taking advantage of the just spending money and getting the players that they want. It kind of speaks to an overall issue with baseball right now in terms of like teams spending big time dollars for these free agents. So the Dodgers are like, well, we've got the money. They make a lot of money from their RSN deal as well.
Absolutely.
And so there's like, we're just going to go out there and spend, and we're just going to, load up. And so I've got the Dodgers going in, and also I see them going back to another World Series as well. I think I look at this team, and it's really tough to vote against when it comes to the Dodgers. Other aspects of the division in the NL West, I kind of want to root for the Padres, because the story of their owner before he passed, of like trying to buy in and try and get all these great players. Fernando Tatis Jr. could be somebody that could be in that MVP conversation.
Absolutely.
For the Padres. And I like that team too. I like Cease. Obviously, Yu Darvish has always been somebody that I've enjoyed just for many years. I enjoy watching Yu Darvish pitch.
Great player. Great pitcher.
Great player.
Yeah.
Obviously in the later half of his career, but still somebody I enjoy watching. But yeah, this Dodgers squad, it's tough to vote against them. I also kind of want to root for the Diamondbacks. There always seems to be the team that, like, when they win and go big, they go big hard. Like, all of a sudden you're like, they're in the World Series this year. What happened with this Diamondback squad? But that's always going to be a sleeper team for me. But it's especially because they acquired Josh Naylor, the Canadian, to the Diamondbacks, and I like him as well. They got some good players. Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who plays out in left field. Saw him with the Jays as well, and good on them for getting out of the Jays. Not only that, but Gabriel Moreno at catcher. That is somebody that was part of that deal for Varsho a couple of years ago now.
That's right.
So that's certainly not on my mind as a Jays fan at all. but yeah, it's Dodgers all the way. That's my pick.
So you have Ohtani winning MVP and Skeens as Cy Young. I have Soto as MVP and Zach Wheeler as Cy Young. I think Wheeler's a good pitcher. I think he had a finished second in the voting last year, if I'm not mistaken. I think this year he's going to win a Cy Young. I think Soto is off to a good start. Hit a home run yesterday. I saw yesterday. I think as long as the Mets don't get cursed again, I think the Mets have the potential to be. It's either going to be, to me, in my opinion, it's either going to be the Phillies and the Dodgers coming out of the NHL, or the Mets and the Dodgers. And I predict the Dodgers, Red Sox World Series. I'm not ready to pick a winner yet because it wouldn't make sense. I'd be just guessing at this point, 2 games into the season. But I wouldn't mind seeing another East versus West like we saw last year, but just replace the Yankees with the Red Sox. That's my pick anyway. I think we're going to be talking about more Major League as the season go on. There's more stories that are going to develop, so we're going to stay on track. I'm a huge baseball fan, coaching as well for me, so I'm trying to stay on top of the game as well, trying to bring a different perspective. But early on in the season, I thought we could just give our previews, so we all did a good job. Awesome. Moving on to one last thing before we get to our rant or hot takes of the day. I wanted to quickly browse over Ovechkin chasing Gretzky. He's at 889. It's unavoidable that he's going to pass. Is he going to do it this season? I hope so. I hope we don't drag this on. I just beat him. Just get it over with. Any thoughts on him breaking this record? Do you think we'd ever see anybody breaking that record?
I, for the longest time, I thought Gretzky's goal record was going to be something that would just be the one that, players wouldn't be able to reach because of just how dominant he was in the NHL.
Right.
But boy, can Ovechkin score goals.
It's
it seems
insane.
like he finds just spot, especially in that face-off circle. He just finds the spot and wires it home.
Isn't it surprising that he scores most of his goals from the same position and that teams just can't stop him?
Can't figure it out. They just can't seem to figure it out.
It's like all of a sudden they forget that Ovechkin is alone in the circle right there. They're just like,
I told you not to put him there. Come on. Have we not learned this already? But yeah, it's something else to watch. I would really like to see it happen this year. If it's not this year, it's definitely going to be next year.
Yeah.
If he wasn't injured this year, it would probably be already done at this point. The
Absolutely,
pace that he was putting on.
Yeah.
So
How many games
I would
left?
like to see it happen. Sorry?
How many games left?
I think there's like 10 or 11 games left. I don't know specifically for the Capitals, but I know there's like a couple teams have like 10 to 12 games
And
left.
they're like the best team in the NHL, no?
But yeah, they've already clinched their playoff
like
spot for this
103
year.
points or some shit like that. Like I was blown away. I don't pay attention to much hockey, and when I saw they were the best team, I was like, I thought they weren't even in the playoffs. I was like, wow. It's like the fuck. Like,
oh, they're a good team this year. They recently re-signed their defenseman Jacob Chikrin into a massive extension. It was kind of a little bit of a risky team because Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's on that squad, he was somebody that seemed to flame out at every organization he was at, and players would turn on him. But this year he's been good. Chikrin was another guy that had, when he was with Ottawa, there was some questions on his commitment to the team and how he was kind of getting along with players, but they've been able to make it work in Washington. And like you mentioned, now they've already clinched they're the first team to clinch their playoff spot. They're the best team in the NHL.
They got 10 games remaining.
There you go.
82 games, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 82 so they got 2 games remaining. My prediction is that he beats it on the last game of the season.
Well, who's the team that he faces off at the last game of the season?
Who?
Would be the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Oh, yeah, no, that's it. That's absolutely what it is going to be.
So that's
the script has been written before. If you don't believe there's a script, the script is right there. It's over. So, I didn't even know.
It's over.
I was half joking. I just decided that he was going to do it in the last game of the season, but now you tell me he's playing Sidney Crosby. Absolutely, he's going to beat out Sidney Crosby. It's funny how many goals he has, and Sidney Crosby still has more points than him.
Yeah.
I was utterly surprised. I was looking through the names the other day of like the amount of points, all-time leaders, like of who has the points. Gretzky obviously at number 1, but Sidney Crosby has been able to like have one hell of a career. Obviously 3 Stanley Cups. Like he's gonna go down. I think my favorite player as a Pittsburgh Penguin fan was Mario Lemieux. He's my number 1. Number 2, Sidney Crosby. I think Sidney Crosby, one of the best players to ever do it. Like he all-around player. So I wasn't surprised. I was just like, shit, like is he that high? Like I think he's up 7th, I think, or like, and there's only really him and Ovechkin that's even close on top of the list as far as active players, if you really look at it, right? So quickly moving on, but I want to say something before we move on from hockey. Do you think so? The Ottawa Senators, your Ottawa Senators, they're in the playoffs right now.
They have got the first wild card spot right now as we record here on a Saturday.
Right. Do you think the Montreal Canadiens have enough left in the tank to make a wild card spot?
It is a shootout right now for that second wild card spot.
Them and Columbus right now are 75 points. Like. They've had a stretch of bad games in the last few games. Like I listened to TSN 690s on my way to work and back to work, just trying to. I've kind of grown myself into a Canadians fan as well because I live in Montreal, you know, so you kind of have to get by default like on track with them, you know. I like their young team, I like who they are, and I'm excited that the potential of making, because the expectations were very low for them this year. I don't think anybody was expecting for the longest time they were at the bottom of the barrel as far as their conference. Like, they were not doing very well, and all of a sudden they got on a hot streak. Montembeault has been stellar, you know, and they got some good games out of their backup, and he's been struggling now. I think for the last few games he gave up early goals there in his last appearance again. I think he's been struggling, but I think they're really good. I'm really surprised by their thing, and I'm hoping that they get in and it'll be the Sens and the Canadians with the wild card spots. That's what I want.
Same
anyway.
here. I think if you're Gary Bettman, you want Columbus in, only because Columbus has been a team they haven't had the greatest history when it comes to playoffs, other than sweeping the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round,
right,
a few years ago, when the Lightning were this unstoppable team.
They beat my Pittsburgh Penguins too a few years back in the first round.
I think you were correct.
Yeah, I was.
But
pissed.
other than that, Columbus, it's weird. Like, every once in a while they'll beat a good team, but then it's Columbus. Like, they haven't. Like, this is not Rick Nash playing for the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's still a solid squad, but I think there's also a lot of motivation for them with everything that what happened with Johnny Gaudreau earlier this year, of course. And
yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be good.
So, but I think it's gonna be tough. We'll see. It's really a shootout right now for that final wild card spot. Right now, if you're a Habs fan, you'll have to do the rare thing of cheer for the Senators today, because they're taking on those Blue Jackets. And so if you're the Sens, obviously you win, you get yourselves a little further down. You get a little bit more of a cushion on that first wild card spot. If you're Columbus, obviously you win and you get yourselves a little bit separated with Montreal and try and get out of that. And so it's kind of a race right now. I'm still hopeful. I like the Sens squad. You know, they were coming off of a 6-game winning streak. Now they've kind of been like, they'll win one, they'll lose one, they'll win one. So now it's just trying to find that consistency back.
Yeah.
But when the Sens are on, and I obviously say this as a Sens fan, but when they're on and everything's clicking, it's a really good hockey team that's out there. And to the point where, you know, some of the top teams like the Leafs and the Panthers, they're talking about maybe we don't want to face the Senators in the first round because of the way that they play. It's like, especially hearing that from Leafs fans is fun to hear. We haven't heard that with Ottawa in a while. So, but I think Montreal certainly has a chance. I think, you know, as I look through in the playoff race, the Rangers are also kind of in there as well. But I could see Montreal clinching. They just got to put together some wins. It's a good young squad. I got to give the Montreal that, but it's just a matter of putting some wins together at this point.
Yeah, if they can gain some momentum and get hot at the right time right now with 10 games remaining, I think they have a chance here. Let's end it up with either a hot take or a rant of your choice. I'll let you go first. I got one, so I'll let you go first.
Boy, you know, it's funny. I was going to mention the Ottawa Senators in terms of my rants, but I'll use this opportunity again to plug the Trenton Golden Hawks and how they're doing right now. Currently, I was supposed to play Game 5 yesterday, but they lost, or rather, because of the freezing rain that's been going through in our area, it was postponed to Sunday. So we'll have to see how that goes there. But I was tuning into the game Thursday night. They were in Stouffville, Ontario, and the Golden Hawks were able to win Game 4 in double overtime with 3 seconds left in double overtime. It was insane. I had a shorthanded goal on top of that as well. It was insane.
So what's the series now?
Series is now 3-1 for the Trenton Golden Hawks. It's been a bit of a grind for that team in terms of trying to get wins together. Stouffville has been putting up an incredible fight, as you know, the double overtime one, and so it's going to be interesting to see how they do tomorrow. But it's all in the race to try and get to the finals this year. You know, I was looking at the other teams, the defending champion Collingwood Blues. They're down 3-1 to the Milton Menace right now, so that's kind of something keeping an eye on as well. And so fingers crossed when it comes to the Trenton Golden Hawks right now and how they're able to fare. We'll see how they do. So that is my sort of rants for this segment this week.
Awesome. All good luck to your Golden Hawks. I have a rant that I want to share off. I've been meaning to get off my chest because it happened a couple weeks ago, and you probably saw it as well. It happened on AEW. It's about pro wrestling, all right?
Boy, I think I know exactly where you're going.
I'm going with this. I saw a fucking John Moxley spot. Do you remember the spot?
Oh, yeah.
Right. When I saw this, I saw the spot the first time. For people that don't know what I'm talking about, Edge or Copeland or whatever the fuck he calls himself now.
Cope.
Hurts my head.
I don't like the name either.
Cope, aka Edge, Adam Copeland, had this bat or this cricket paddle. I think it was more like a cricket paddle. And it had not only 2 or 3 nails in it, it had 50 nails in it. And they were long nails. Yeah. And he hit him, and I was like, all right, hitting him is okay. But when he suplexed him on it, and the nails got stuck in his back, I thought that was the dumbest thing I had ever seen, and one of the dumbest. Look, I've seen death matches, but at least the death match is expected. This was so unnecessary for who was in the ring, I thought, between Copeland and Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley is one of the best professional wrestlers in the game today. I love him. I love the energy he brings. I love how he's able to this character of his that he's been able to cultivate in the AEW. The reason I'm ranting about this is just because I thought it was, I think if I had seen what's the skater kid in AEW?
Darby Allin.
Allin. If I had seen him do that, I'd be like, yeah, it's stupid, but it kind of goes with who he is.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was completely unnecessary as far as who was in the ring. I don't know what the storyline between Copeland or Cope has been between him and Moxley. Maybe that brings it forward. Maybe you can add to this because you follow more AEW than I do. But I just thought when I saw that, it was rubbish. It was unnecessary. It was not needed, especially where he's at in his career and who as much of a star that he is. That's my rant. I thought that was one of the dumbest things I had seen in a long time in professional wrestling.
Yeah, it was a spot that certainly got a lot of people talking.
Right.
And I remember seeing that spot and immediately I'm like, oh, people are going to discuss the spot for a bit.
And maybe that was the goal of it to bring eyes.
For sure. I look at it this way when it comes to that sort of spot. So I've never been the biggest deathmatch guy.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been somebody that, goes out of their way to watch old CZW stuff or, even some of the old ECW death matches back in the day, because I don't see with a lot of the death matches I've seen a lot of the psychology. There has been some that's worked for me. Like
absolutely.
I go back to the Mick Foley matches with Terry Funk and Atsushi Onita. Like I see those matches and I should mention Terry Funk on my
Yeah, let's go.
So perfect timing. So there are some death matches that work, but a lot of the times I find when people wrestle death matches just for the sake of the shock value, it's like, oh, I'm going to smash glass over your head. All right, this time I'm going to, hit you with the barbed wire bat, right? And it's like,
it's gotten so ridiculous that the guys lean in so that you can hit him with the bulbs on. Like I've seen that so many times. Like, dude, you're just laying there and waiting for the guy to hit you with the bulb.
I could tell you a story here actually. So I was at Cork and Hall for a show, and the main event was a death match. I forget what they named the gimmick of the match, but essentially they put up light tubes on the ropes, and then they had one of the wrestlers come out and they had a stack of light tubes, and I will say it was the finish to the match. But guy did a Canadian destroyer into the stack of light tubes that they had. It was like, oh my goodness. So that was the one death match I've seen live. And I sat there and I was like, I get why people love this, because it is seeing what the human body can take. And there is that sort of element to it. But then it's like, in my mind, it's like, okay, I think I've seen enough to kind of last me a bit.
As a guy that's been in the ring before, as a performer, as a wrestler, I would not do these matches. I don't think you could pay me enough money to do these matches. My son likes them. He enjoys them. They've been on the shows. They've had one on the shows at NOW. Every show I've been on in the last few months, they always have a death match. My brain is completely mush. I'm not even going to keep talking about this. I forgot someone's name completely right now. You'll know who he is, but I won't mention it. I'm embarrassed that I forgot what his name is. But but it wasn't it's just, I just thought that for me, that spot for who it was happening to was just completely unnecessary. So that was my rant of this episode. Yeah, that's it. Let's end it on this. We've been doing exactly an hour and a half. It's beautiful. We got a lot of talk. I'm glad we got through everything today. I'm glad we got. So hopefully next episode we can kind of go back to just not having to make up for everything we missed in the last few weeks. So keeping short and treat. That's it. Thanks for tuning in. If you're still listening to this episode, I greatly appreciate you. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to SVGTV on YouTube. Check us out. Help us out. It would be greatly appreciated. Until next time, this is Blue Collar Sports. See you later. Thanks, brother.